Broadcasting from the KMF Collective Studio, it's time for the Keep Moving Forward podcast. Join us every week as we dive into the stories of remarkable current and former athletes that have transitioned into the real world. Now here's your host, Katie Galley.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the 234th episode of the Keep Moving Forward podcast. I'm your host, Katie Galley. Today in the KMF Collective Studio, I have with me former collegiate basketball player, CrossFit Level 3 certified trainer and staff member, co-owner and head coach at CrossFit Rife, and co-host of the Best Hour of Their Day podcast, Jason Fernandez. How are you doing, Fern?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I am doing great. I really can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with me today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I like this stuff, obviously, so
right.
Do it.
Yeah, you seem pretty good at it, so I'm really excited to dive into a conversation with you. And so, Fern, just to get to know you a little bit more so people can know your background, can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how, if at all, was your childhood shaped by athletics?
Oh, yeah, I mean, 100%. So I'm from South Louisiana, so I grew up born and raised in Baton Rouge. And, playing every possible sport that you could imagine. And then my dad just recently retired, actually, but my dad was a basketball coach for 37 years, I believe. He just retired from coaching.
Wow.
So I grew up playing football, basketball, baseball, and then dabbled a little bit in those in high school. And then primarily actually ended up just doing track and basketball in high school. And then played for my dad in high school. I don't know that there would be anything more formative in my youth than sports, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense having it, one, your dad being a coach, and so it's something you grew up around, but then two, you playing so many different sports, catching that love for all different games. And so then, Fern, coming into then high school, when you started to both play basketball and run track, was there a time where you were realizing, okay, if I want to go to the next level, I'm going to have to focus on one or the other? Or did you just continue to play both through high school and then maybe have aspirations to do that for both beyond that?
Yeah, that's a great question. My dad and I sat down when I was in about 8th grade, and he had a conversation with me, and he said, if you want to play at the next level, you have to devote everything you have to this. And within reason. So, luckily my dad had been around for a while at that point and knew better than to just have me playing that singular sport all year round, no breaks whatsoever. So, I dabbled with baseball, but that's tough because there's too much overlap between the seasons.
Right.
Football, I would have loved to play football, but our high school football team wasn't that great. My dad was just like, no, you're not doing that. That's the risk for injury there is too high. So
right.
Track was just a good, and I was a sprinter, so I was a 400 relay guy. And so that was just a good little break and a good little overlap that had some carryover. But it was, right around 8th grade, because I in middle school, I was playing in high school summer league leagues. So we had a pretty good idea that I had a realistic shot of playing division, or just college, not even necessarily a specific division. And so we just devoted all of our efforts into that. And from there on out, it was just all things basketball. But up until high school, it was all three. It was everything I could do up until high school, and that is when really started to narrow that down.
And so, I mean, from that time when you were in 8th grade, and then really beginning to focus, having that kind of dream on your heart to want to go to that next level, did you ever have a time where you thought, maybe I don't want to go to this next level, maybe I want to keep playing all these different sports? Or was it once you fell in love with basketball, it was just all basketball all the time, you knew that was your goal, you wanted to see how far you could take the sport?
I was very fortunate where I never had any desire really to do anything else. I mean, I had the itch to play other sports, but basketball was my thing. I was a student of the game. I was super passionate about it. I loved everything about it. It's all I did. I watched video when I was home. I'd run to the gym. I would stay late at night. I'd be there on the weekends, just training all the time. And when I wasn't at school, I was in either camps or summer league or AAU tournaments or traveling somewhere. So it is literally all I did for those 4 years.
Yeah. And you're right. It's a fortunate thing to find something you love so much that it doesn't feel like you're taking time away from other things to dedicate to it. You just are choosing to spend your time doing that one thing.
I was very fortunate in that respect where because I had been in the locker rooms for so long up to that point. I had a lot of guys that I really looked up to and aspired to be like. So I'd be remiss if I didn't kind of mention that, because it wasn't all just my own personal determination. There was a lot of inspiration involved there, and that was something that drove a lot of what I did, is because I wanted to be like those guys.
Yeah.
Right,
you're right. I mean, looking up to people, having those kind of influential figures in your life to say, hey, I want to be like them in a couple of years or whatever it is, being able to see someone in that next stage of life and wanting to kind of emulate that. And so then, Fern, coming up on graduation from high school, looking to that next level, did you already have college offers? Did you know exactly where you wanted to go? Did you know it was Division I, or what was that process like for you?
Yeah, but by the time I got to my senior year, Division I was pretty much it. I probably had some offers from some D2, D3 schools, but Division I was kind of where I was at. And then obviously within the Division I matrix, there's, mid-major and major. And the Naval Academy is kind of probably like a mid-major to the Patriot League. So I took all my visits, because you get 5, or you used to get 5. Because my dad was pretty adamant about that. And then pretty much came down to, there was a couple schools that really, like Eastern Tennessee, Davidson, Centurion. I probably could have gone to LSU locally there. It would have been like a partial scholarship there. But then I just decided on the Naval Academy. I had a really good visit with those guys. They came down several times to see. But that's just, it was a cool experience as an athlete to go through that, to go to college campuses, to go through the process of being courted, if you will, and then make that decision from there. So, I chose the Naval Academy. It gave me an extra year of playing because they have a prep school. So I went to prep school because I'm not the brightest kid. And, so I went there. So you play against a lot of the bigger prep schools that people may have heard about if they're in basketball. And then you go to the Naval Academy and you kind of start your collegiate career there. So it was an extra year for me to play, which was big. So
yeah. And so independent of that, wanting that extra year and really being kind of blown away by loving the experience when you got courted by them and going to that next level. Did you have an aspiration also to join the Navy?
I did, and I didn't really know that until I started having the conversation with the coaching staff there. And something about it was very appealing. Quite frankly, I'm kind of probably a little bit of a sadist, but the intrigue of the difficulty level of it was a lot of what drew me to the Naval Academy. It was a lot of things about it were not in my wheelhouse. I had some aspirations of kind of going into the Spec Ops world afterwards that didn't work out, and probably better that way. So there was a lot of things in there, and the prestige of it all is enticing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
When I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, that it's a pretty prestigious institution to come out of.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so then, that's really interesting though, too. Being drawn to that difficulty and the challenge, not only because you would get to play basketball and continue on that career and something that you loved, but then too, in tandem, then pursuing something new that really hadn't occurred to you until that moment. And so, Fern, before going into college and obviously being driven, and at least in part, to want to play basketball at that next level, did you have any idea at 18 years old, forward thinking, what you might want to do after college, or even before you knew you were going to go to the Naval Academy?
So this is a funny story. People laugh about this. So quite literally until my daughter was born in 2014, I had full intention of becoming a dentist.
Wow.
Yeah. So I graduated the Naval Academy with an undergrad in economics, and then probably, when did I start going back to school? At some point in my naval career, I started going back to school because the the Naval Academy is a liberal arts school, and that term is loosely because it's largely an engineering school, but it is titled a arts school. And so I was missing a ton of credits to even apply for dental schools. So I started going back to school, and I was short like 30 credits. You know, I had no anatomy and physiology. I had no biology. I retook chemistry, and then I'd take organic chemistry. So I was short quite a bit. And so I went back to school, finished all of my prerequisites, and then had registered to take for med school, it's the MCAT, but for dental school, it's the DAP, it's the DAT, and had started putting that together, and then started ironing out schools that I was going to start applying to, and started talking to the advisors and the admissions boards for all of that. And then my daughter was born. She was born 25 weeks premature at that point. So wow. At that point we had at this point in my life, I have the gym. We've opened our affiliate for about 6 years. I was active duty. My wife's still active duty. I was going to school at night. I was working for HQ. And when my daughter was born, most of that stuff went away. You know, the closest dental school would have been minimum a 2-hour drive. We had a business, and that decision just kind of made itself. You know, I said, well, that is just not a feasible option for me at this point. I can't leave my wife here with a kid and a business while she's still active duty, because my wife's still in the Navy. So, you know, that just kind of went away. And then I went with the other option, which was, okay, well, I'm going to dive full steam into CrossFit and try to, run this business and work for HQ and make that a career. So yeah. That's kind of how that unfolded. And I'm quite frankly, I'm happier it did unfold that way.
Right. I mean, clearly it's led you down an incredible path, but why did you want to be a dentist in the first place?
You know, I always found dentistry I still do. Like I have a weird fascination with teeth and stuff like that. But so it's interesting now that I look back at it. A lot of why I was drawn to it is because I had a couple of friends whose dads were dentists or orthodontists. And I was very much drawn to the entrepreneur aspect of that, except at that point in my life, I didn't really know that's what it was. So, you know, that was just the thing that I had attached it to. But now knowing a little bit more about myself and having done a lot of, soul searching, stuff like that, I think I was just chasing being a business owner.
Yeah. And that really does make sense, because I think it seems that the discipline and the attributes of an athlete are inherently linked to that of entrepreneurship. I mean, you have those same trappings. And so coming from the world of athletics, then kind of craving that desire to be your own boss and set those goals for yourself, they kind of seem to work hand in hand.
Kind of. I think there's a lot of overlap, but I'm pretty blunt with people about entrepreneurship. It is not for the faint of heart. It's not even what people think it is. You know, I like to describe, I don't know if this is a family friendly show, but it's a lot of eating shit sandwiches is how I would describe it. If you're not a problem solver, if you don't deal with stress well, if you get overwhelmed easily, if you have a problem solving people issues, it is definitely not for you. But that's all it consists of. Wow. You know, so. There's definitely some things that carry over from sports in general, which is the work ethic, obviously. That is cost of entry. Planning, like a season per se. Like trying to train towards something is all of those things have tremendous carryover. But at the same time, it is not for everybody. There's some in sports. There's a tangible goal or end state. In business, to steal from Simon Sinek, it's an infinite game. So then you have to switch your mindset a little bit.
Yeah. And so then, and that does make a lot of sense. Some of the attributes of being an athlete carry over. But then too, I would imagine a big portion of it is learning by experience. And so then for you having this discovery of what entrepreneurship really did entail, do you think then maybe drawing on your experience from the Navy, was that more of what helped prepare you for entrepreneurship? Or did you just kind of not know you were fully unprepared until you got into it?
I mean, the Navy definitely played a big role in that, probably more from a leadership standpoint,
Right.
aspect of it, not necessarily from the problem solving or just the ability to make mistakes.
Yeah.
I would probably give my parents the credit for that one.
Yeah.
Our household was I don't want to say rugged, but my dad's an immigrant from Cuba. My mom has been self-employed for almost 40 years. And,
Wow.
In our house, it was just kind of like, hey, nobody cares about your problems. Pick yourself up, keep moving. You're going to make mistakes. The worst thing you can do when it comes to mistakes is dwell on it. So that was the idea of dwelling on mistakes was very much beaten out of us as children. It was just not accepted to hang your head and feel sorry for yourself. So that I have to fully credit my parents for, because that, I think, has probably helped me more than anything in my life, whether it be sports, whether it be the military, whether it be business and entrepreneurship. Just this idea of my dad would describe it as, the best athletes in the world. So if you think about the Michael Jordans, you think about the Jerry Rices, the Wayne Gretzky's, pick a sport and pick the top of their athlete. They all have what you would describe as short-term memory, meaning they're not thinking about what just happened all the time. It's constant moving forward. It's a quick check to do an assessment on what just happened. Why did that go wrong? Okay, cool. What did I learn from it? Moving on. But I'm not going to keep thinking about it over and over and over again. And that, I think, that ability to have short-term memory with long-term vision in front of you is probably one of the most valuable kind of traits that you can try to develop or train yourself to have over time.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. And it makes so much sense. I mean, I love focusing on the fact the worst thing that you can do is making a mistake and then dwelling on it, staying in it. You have to figure out how to move forward from that. But obviously that's so much more challenging to do in practice than it is to say it. But then, like you're saying, growing up in that atmosphere, that environment being fostered, having that fostered by your parents was just incredibly helpful in shaping you to everything that you've done pretty much since then.
I think so. And then as painful as it was, the coach that I played for in college was not that way. So, and I saw the result of that. So I came from playing underneath somebody who, let's just say you had a bad pass. And if you hung your head or you weren't sprinting in the other direction, that was the fastest way to get pulled out of the game. So it wasn't about making mistakes. It's like, you're going to make mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable. Like, there is no way to avoid them.
Right.
Do them at full speed with effort, and we can deal with that. Hang your head and feel sorry is like literally how you get the first seat on the bench. And then changing and then going to college where any mistake was not tolerated, and then everybody lived in this world of fear. And it was a really, really rough time for me in college. I went from loving a game to, I don't want to say I hated it, but when I kind of hung up my basketball shoes, I mean, I didn't play basketball for years. I mean, I literally did not touch basketball. I was like, I'm good,
Wow.
And I think a lot of it had to do with living under that thumb of like, making mistakes is not okay, and you're going to constantly be punished for any mistake that you make. So, I'm hyper aware of that. It's just like, listen, like, you're going to mess things up. There's a difference between being lazy and not paying attention and just going through the process of learning.
Yeah.
And while it's a fine line, how you treat people and how you get treated in those scenarios probably is the difference between people who succeed and fail.
Yeah. That is a really amazing point. And so then too, Fern, that time being in college and having kind of that harshness set in, and like you said, it led you to want to hang up your basketball shoes after your career had ended, at least for a period of time. How did you navigate, that just the experience that you had, the harshness of basketball? Was it just the overall experience of being in the Naval Academy, or was it specifically on the court during practice and games, or just, I guess, can you talk a little bit about that whole experience, how you navigated the student athlete and experience being at the Naval Academy?
Well, not well is probably the best way. Not well, so I was constantly on academic probation. it's probably not a school for me, quite frankly. I mean, I did graduate, but almost at the bottom of the class. The school, so it's largely an engineering school. My major is economics, but everybody takes electrical engineering, you take thermodynamics, you take a whole boatload of classes that are requirements of that institution in order to graduate and be commissioned. So that was a struggle. Being on the basketball court was a struggle because you're either not playing or you're dealing with an injury or everybody hates the coach and all these things. And then my senior year, I was the team captain, and the coach was basically fired mid-season, but was allowed to stay on for the remainder of the season. Oh. So, which was one of the tougher. I mean, I remember the athletic director called me in the office and he asked me, some questions, and as a 22, 23 at this time, I felt like I was really in a pickle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I said, how honestly do I answer these questions? And I felt I could answer them honestly because I felt I had enough knowledge and context, having been the son of a coach for, at this point, probably 25 years.
Right.
I felt that I could answer honestly, and it was my duty to answer honestly. And I don't know that I got him fired. I think that was coming. Maybe I just validated the decision. Mm-hmm. But the remainder of that season was tough because my job essentially just devolved into trying to keep people from quitting.
Wow.
To quitting the team. So, but to go back to where we kind of started this is like, how did I deal with that? Was, it was a lot of conversations with my dad, to which point, he never gave me any sympathy. He was like, listen, he was like, this is your job. Like, this is what you came for. Life is hard sometimes. Deal with it. How you're going to be judged and how you're going to move forward is largely going to be determined by how you deal with this crappy thing right now. So, he was always one to be, and it might sound a little harsh, but it was done with love, obviously, and empathy. And he understood what I was going through, but he never kind of allowed me to be the victim in the scenario. He was just like, listen, it sucks. What are you going to do about it?
Wow, man.
That's it. So,
yeah.
That had a lot to do with it. And I learned a lot in that process. To this day, that was one of the harder kind of periods of my life, is dealing with all of that my senior year.
Yeah.
And there's actually, I never read a book through college until my senior year, like not a book, which I'm not sure if that's impressive or terrible, but somebody gave me a book called My Losing Season. And I cannot remember who the author is, but it's a fantastic book. But it was pivotal for me because when I was reading that book, it was almost a mirror image of my life at that time. And I believe he was at the Citadel. God, it's going to drive. It's not, I can't remember, but he wrote a series of books, but that one, and I kind of was reading them. It was very surreal for me to read that. But so that kind of helped a little bit because I was like, oh, somebody else has been through this. And what I got out of reading that book is there are lessons to be gained here. So move forward, deal with it. Put these in your tool belt because they will somehow, somewhere be valuable to you later in life.
Absolutely. Wow. And I mean, having something like that resonate with you. And I looked it up while you were talking. It's Pat Conroy wrote that book.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pat Conroy. Yep.
I've read it. Yeah. Pat Conroy is a great author.
He is.
That's got to be a great book then. I mean, to have it, kind of work in tandem with what you were going through and to be able to relate to that. And so Fern, going through that really challenging time of your life, really struggling with the sport that gave you so much for so long, that you gave so much to, having that passion and drive, and then coming up to your senior year and going through all of that. Even, before or during that time, did you ever have aspirations to try and continue your basketball career to the next level, to go pro, or did you know that after your time at the Naval Academy that basketball would be done for you?
No, I wasn't that good. So that was, I knew going into college, like that was going to be the end. Like that was the peak. Everything else after that, you're talking about fraction of a percent. But aside from that, there's only a handful of guys. I think David Robinson is the only person that's played basketball at the Naval Academy. There's been more football players, but he's the only one I'm pretty sure that's played basketball post Naval Academy. So that was really not an option. I had a couple guys that I played with there who dabbled in some stuff overseas, but it's just really not. It's really not an option. It's not feasible based on your required commitment upon graduating. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was to the Navy. It was to be a naval officer and have a career in some way, shape, or form.
Wow. And so then coming up on graduation, knowing that basketball was going to end, did you, even in the midst of that, wanting kind of ready for that next step, did you feel a sense of loss or sadness when basketball did come to an end, or were you just ready to take that next step?
I'd probably be lying if I said there was no sadness, but it was honestly more of a relief than anything. Just the amount of stress that I didn't have or carry around with me anymore, and was significant. I distinctly remember, like, after we lost in the tournament, in the conference tournament, that after that I didn't have anywhere to be anymore. Like, I was it. It was crushing to think that this thing that I've been doing my whole life was over, and like it's just gone. But there was a relief. It's just like, to some degree, I'm not burdened by this. I don't have this requirement to do this thing anymore that I do love, but make no mistake about it, at that level, it is work. It is a job. Yeah. So there was relief there. But it was obviously paired with a lot of sadness. But then excitement, right? So you've been trapped in the Naval Academy for all this time. You're finally going to get released into the wild and be able to be functioning, or at least a semi-functioning adult, and then go chase this new endeavor, which is being in the military and leading people. So
yeah. And so making that transition, then, of course, like you said, recognizing the maybe lost sense of identity that goes with leaving behind something you've dedicated your whole life to, but then being excited to take that next step, something you had been studying and working for those last few years leading up to the Naval Academy. And so entering then the Navy, making that transition, what was that like for you leaving the academy and then entering into, like you said, the wild?
It was, and I use that term very intentionally when I say into the wild, because it was reckless at best, belligerent at worst is how I would describe it. I had a rough first couple of years as a young junior officer, got in a lot of trouble, did an inordinate amount of drinking, and just, and I never got in like serious trouble. I did have a run-in with the law at some point, but I was fortunate that I think I had some leaders that looked over me and kind of recognized what was happening there. Nothing I was doing was malicious in intent, right? I wasn't doing drugs or anything, or like, doing anything crazy. I was a little on the wild side. Mm-hmm. And, so I had some issues there, and I had some skippers and some sea daddies, as we'll call them, that kind of yanked me back in line and gave me some second and third and fifth and sixth chances. And when I look back at it now, it's because I didn't really have a direction. Mm-hmm. I left there. I was going into a community that I wasn't super pumped about. I was a supply officer in the Navy, which is logistics, finance, budgeting, acquisition. And that wasn't really what I wanted to do. When I got to the Naval Academy, I had these spec ops aspirations, and then I get there and they're like, "You're colorblind. You're barred from doing basically anything cool." I was like, well, that sucks. Yeah. So from there, I kind of tried to still do this. Maybe there's a way for me to get around it. So after I, spent 2 years, kind of drinking and partying myself into oblivion, I refocused, and I was like, all right, I want to try to go and do a lateral transfer into the SEAL team. So for people who aren't aware of that, that is basically, I want to transfer from this specific community in the Navy to another community in the Navy, which is very hard to do, particularly if you have a medical disqualification. Mm-hmm. So I called up a buddy who was going through it, and his name is Brendan Looney, and he passed away several years ago. Actually, September 21st. That anniversary was just this past week.
Wow.
In a helicopter crash, and he and I went to prep school together. We had been friends for years. He was a physical freak. He's just legendary in all the circles that he's in. I saw a bunch of people that I didn't realize he served with, posted a bunch of stuff about him, like Dan Crenshaw and Josh Bridges and a couple other people.
Wow.
But so he's colorblind as well. And basically, he and I sat down. He was like, "Hey, I'm doing this, and I got a waiver. You might be able to get one." He's like, "Or you can figure out how to cheat on the vision test." And I was like, "All right." So I was like, "I'm going to pursue both. I'm going to figure out how to cheat, and I'm going to apply for a waiver." So he got selected, and obviously went. And he was like, he was like the one guy out of 20 applicants in that pool. And then I went through it for a couple more years, trying to apply over and over and over. But once you hit lieutenant in the Navy, you're kind of not eligible anymore. So I applied for basically almost 3 years consecutively to do that. Finally, get the no in a pretty devastating manner. The community manager from the SEAL teams calls me and he's like, "Hey, you were the top candidate, but the supply corps didn't make a slot for you to leave. So we had to go with the second guy." And I was like, "I'd have preferred that you just hadn't called me. That's, I would have preferred thinking I just wasn't good enough." So anyway, I had to swallow that pill. That was, probably a down 6 to 12 months of just kind of figuring out, because now again, I had no direction.
Yeah.
When I had decided I wanted to try to make that transition, everything I did drove towards that. And then again, I was like, okay, well now what do I do? So then off floating into oblivion yet again. And then right around that time, because this is 2008. Yeah, right around that is when I find CrossFit.
There you go.
And now I have not necessarily a purpose, but I have somewhere to direct my energy at this point.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to walk into Pat Sherwood's gym in that year and meet him and a lot of other people, but 2 guys in particular, Pat and then Joe Alexander, who's also a flow master and kind of one of the head honchos in the training department, and kind of fell underneath their wing and was fortunate enough to start, getting nudged in that direction. And then fortunate enough to end up kind of going through that process of interning. And largely that is what led me to, here today.
Right. So that first initial time you walked into a CrossFit gym in 2008, were you pursuing just like you had in the past, a new athletic challenge or something to push yourself, or were you specifically looking to start coaching?
Oh no, I definitely wasn't looking to start coaching. And even for the first couple of years of CrossFit, people asked me, they're like, "Are you going to coach? Your dad's a coach?" I was like, "No, I have no idea. I have no intention of being a coach ever." Like, no, I'm not doing it, which is funny. But no, I was just looking for something to do. And my wife actually, she's like, "Hey, I found this thing. Let's go check it out." And I was like, "Okay, cool." We go there and immediately it's just like, "Oh, I get this. Like, I understand how this works. Like, this is cool." Like, because my wife played volleyball and softball. So we're both athletes and just like trying to find something to do, the gym thing, just the standard, buys and tries thing got old pretty quick.
Right.
Because that's never how we had trained. We'd never trained to just do that. So,
right. Yeah.
So it was a very natural transition, and having an athletic background, particularly at that time, in the CrossFit evolution, gave you a leg up. Like if you were coming to the table with any sort of background in strength and conditioning, you had like a huge leg up. And I was super fortunate in college that one of my coaches, a guy named Kurt Wolfolk, whose daughter is married to Coach Bergner's son.
Oh, wow.
And she was an Olympian. So, I had been exposed to, weightlifting and powerlifting and some really high level coaches like early on. I spent some time with Gail Hatch in high school because he was down there in the Baton Rouge area. Mm-hmm. My sister was a nationally ranked powerlifter. Like our powerlifting coach in high school was like he was the first guy to break 2,500 pounds in powerlifting.
Dang.
So I was very fortunate in all that respect where I had been exposed to all that. And only years later did I realize like how lucky and how rare that was.
Yeah.
So, I walked in there and then really just used it as an outlet. And my wife and I were kind of like the goon squad at CrossFit Virginia Beach for a long time. And then eventually it kind of evolved into coaching. We left after Pat left, and we kind of bounced around to some gyms for a while. And then it just kind of fell into our lap. It's like, well, maybe we can do this. Right. So we did, and we did it horribly for many years. And like most people, and then eventually started to slowly kind of get it together and are still working on that. So. Yeah.
And so initially when you got involved, like you just fell in love with it, of course, like you're saying, having that unique background, both of you and your wife being able to be thrust into this world that it kind of just fit. And then learning that maybe it is, going down this path of opening your own box one day. But then too, in tandem, like you said, starting to intern, did you know that you wanted to eventually work for CrossFit, become a trainer? How did all of that, did it just kind of work all together and you found yourself down this path?
Well, kind of, sort of. I started like a lot of people at that time where I wanted to compete.
Yeah.
And again, this is early in the CrossFit Games before it looks anything the way it does today. So, I started to compete and again, having a slight advantage, having come from a training background. I was competed at regionals in 9, 10, 11, 12, got injured in 2013 during the Open, I believe. And so I was, like 33 at this point. And at that point I ruptured my Achilles and I was like, okay, this is probably over for me. And at that point I was like, okay, well, at this point, I probably should find some other way to direct this passion, at which point I just turned it to coaching. And I was like, well, there's probably a decent chance that there's a career here. I don't know what that looks like or how, but let me give it a shot. I haven't done a ton of coaching, but I know how it works, Yeah. So I started doing that, and I started kind of, we had already opened our gym for maybe like 2 years at that point. But I was the typical just like guy who worked out at the gym. I wasn't really coaching. Yeah. So, I refocused all my effort into diving into the journal, and I had this insanely elaborate library on my computer where I had pulled down every article and categorized them. I had every video that I'd watched, dozens of times on how to train and how to do all these things. And then I don't remember if it was Joe or Pat, but they would nudge me occasionally, like, hey, you should maybe intern. And I was always of the mindset, I was like, I don't have time for that. And then one day, I don't remember what it was, I was like, you're never going to have time. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're just not the kind of person who just has time. I was like, all right, so let's do it. And so I started the internship process, almost botched it, and then, but was able to recover. And, which was probably kind of par for the course for me in my life at that point. And then, started working. I didn't work a ton the first year or so, just because I was still active duty and didn't have a ton of opportunity to travel as much.
Yeah.
But now there was light at the end of the tunnel. I was like, oh, this can be my post-military career. So let me start, pushing all of my resources and effort towards that. And that is what it is evolved into.
Wow. So, you can, it seems you can point to multiple transitions. The one from college, no longer playing basketball, and then your transition from not achieving that level that you wanted to in the Navy, and then, pivoting again into then competing as an athlete, trying to make it in CrossFit, and then having to pivot again. So constantly making those transitions and navigating kind of those what seemed like pitfalls at the time, but it of course ultimately led you down this path that you're walking today that brought you CrossFit Rife and, being with CrossFit and just into this sport that you now get to dedicate your life to.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think you really notice it at the time.
Right.
I think it's just, and again, I give credit where credit's due to, like a couple tongue lashings from my father, which is like, hey dude, like, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like, stop this self-loathing thing that you got going on here because it didn't work out, which I have to respect is, because I know my dad's story. You're talking about a guy who literally walked across the Rio Grande, escaping from the Communist Party of Cuba and Castro to walk to the United States once they made it like to Mexico.
Jeez.
So I was like, that's legit, you know. I was, you know, so I was never angry at my dad when he would kind of, you know, verbally smack me around like that, because I knew what his struggle was, and I knew what I was dealing with was laughable compared to literally having to leave everything that, you know, escape to another country and then start a whole new life where, by the way, you don't speak the language. So, you know, that has always been kind of a good, like, litmus test for me. It's like, what is struggle? There's people that have it harder than this. And okay, so this thing that you planned out didn't work. Okay, move on.
Yeah.
Like, nobody cares. Like, nobody's sitting around having like a, you know, a memorial for you because, like, your thing didn't work out. You know, like, get over it. You know, now how can you use that to help other people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's all about that perspective of course, you looking at somebody else's story and knowing what they have gone through, but then too, really reflecting on your own. And like you said, you couldn't have possibly recognized it at the time when you're going through all these, I mean, there were struggles for yourself, but then ultimately leading you down this path, you can't really know where they're going to lead you until you're able to reflect back after having all of those experiences.
One thing that I was able to reflect on years after it happened was, and I try to remind myself and kind of carry this forward, is in that process of me trying to lat transfer to try to get selected to go to Buds. I had to do a lot of things, and, you know, I had to get qualifications that weren't required of me in the Navy. I had to take jobs that were way outside of my scope as far as what my job was in the Navy. I had to do a lot of different things, all with the realistic expectation that it might work out. Like, and when I say might, I mean just like percentage wise, it's not good. And when I look back at that, you know, I would describe my naval career as like mediocre, but the pursuit to try to get to something made me a better person, and it made me a better naval officer. Even though I never actually got to the desired end state. It was all about, like, having something to chase, to try to better yourself so that you can try to move forward. And whether that works out or not is kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The point is the constant pursuit of improvement. And I think once you can recognize that and understand that probably most of the time we're not going to get to the originally intended end state.
Yep.
And this is something that I've learned as an entrepreneur, is that most things that you're going to try are not going to work. And that is something that I think is devastating to a lot of people, because it makes them freeze. They're like, well, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm like, nobody knows if it's going to work. You know, it's the same thing I teach coaches at the level 2. They're like, I just don't know. You know, one of the things I tell people is like, hey, listen, there is no requirement for knowing whether a cue is going to work in order to get it. I'm like, that's fundamentally not how cues work.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the point is, cues are not to be correct. They're to get information. So that's kind of how I approach a lot of things in business. I'm like, I have an idea of like I know kind of what needs to happen here, but I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work. So I'm going to try as many things as humanly possible in order to try to get to the right answer. Most of them are going to miss.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've had a lot of people that are like, man, you change your mind a lot. And I'm like, no, I don't change my mind a lot. I'm just not married to things that don't work.
Wow.
So I'm going to shift as quickly as possible in order to get to something that is effective. And I don't care what it is. And that has served me well, because understanding that, yes, these things might not work, but they still have tremendous value because of what I've learned in the process of trying this. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? How could I use that moving forward? And that way, as I get smarter over the years, I'm able to filter much better when somebody comes to me with an idea, or they're like, well, what about this thing? And I'm like, that's not going to work. And here's the 12 reasons why, because I've already been down that path, and I understand it all better. I don't necessarily have the answer, but I know largely what is ineffective at this point because I've done all of it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my approach now, is you got to make mistakes. And I don't know anybody that's uber successful whose list of failures isn't tremendously longer than their list of successes.
Yeah.
Those lists are almost so wildly lopsided. If you actually sat down and talked to these people, you're just like, gee, but you only got to get it right once.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, that's such an incredible perspective to have, because it's true. I mean, it's, and it's not even looking at them as failures per se. It's looking at, okay, well, what did I learn from this? It's something that didn't work out clearly, but it's more about what you learned from that process, so then you can apply it to whatever you do next. And so it's that continual learning. And again, like you said, most of the time, you can't know that until you're able to reflect back and see that whole journey and how it played out.
And you need people along the way to help you. I'm fully transparent on probably more than almost anybody. 2019 was that was our 10th year as an affiliate. It was our worst year ever.
Wow.
Solely due to my decision making. So nothing else. There is nobody else other than me that basically shot the business in the foot. Just not maliciously, not because I was being, not because I was being reckless. It's just sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a dangerous combination if you're somebody who's even mildly ambitious, because you might jump off the ledge thinking that it's only 5 feet and it's 300 feet, and you realize you're not wearing a parachute. You're just like, oh shit, I should have looked a little bit more. And I had a mentor who was just like, he talked to me and he kind of sat me down one day. He's like, hey dude, you have to let that go. It's a thing that happened, but right now you're starting to define yourself by this shitty year. And he said, you have to let that go. And it took a little bit, because I was beating myself up about it. I was like, God, how could you be so dumb? How could you do all these things? How could you not see all these signs? How could you go through how could you do that? And then you start to unpack it and you're like, it's not really that weird. Yeah, I could totally see how I could do that, but I had to let it go. And then I had to just take those lessons for what they were and realize that now I'm so much better armed, not just for me, but the number of people I've helped since then, just this year, who have called me about affiliate issues or acquisitions of affiliates or opening a new affiliate. Right. And I'm very blunt with those people. And that's the thing that I appreciate about a good mentor is, if the answer should be no, don't beat around the bush and tell people, well, maybe you should ask a couple of them. Just tell them no. Don't do that. That's a really dumb idea. You're going to regret it. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I've, learned over the years, and my mistakes might not always be immediately valuable to me, but they'll definitely be valuable later, not only to me, but probably to other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I think you're in precisely the space that allows you to do that. I mean, as a coach, as an owner, as a person working, helping in CrossFit in general, and then too, with your podcast, being able to educate and help people walking that same journey that you've already experienced yourself, being able to offer that advice.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's been most rewarding about that whole just random idea that we decided to execute on, is that that is the rewarding piece about it. The people that will message us or DM us and say, hey, this has been so helpful. I couldn't find this information anywhere else. And you guys don't beat around the bush. You literally just say exactly how it works.
Yeah.
Because that's always what I've wanted. Don't give me the super secret version that has 48 levels to it that I eventually have to ask you. Just tell me how it works.
Right.
And that's always been our approach, and that will always be our approach.
Absolutely. And so, Fern, with that, then, with this incredible experience that you've had in the realm of CrossFit, of course, everything that you've done leading ultimately to this point, and then now with the Best Hour of Their Day podcast, helping to educate and help these coaches and business owners take those next steps. What is your guys' ultimate goal with the podcast?
Oh man, that's a rabbit hole. So we originally didn't know. All we really knew was, hey, these are valuable conversations. That it all started with the trainer dinner. So in seminars, all the trainers go to dinner afterwards, and we'd always, and seminar staff is full of just some amazing people, just really smart, just really cool people. And I always felt privileged to be in those conversations. And I was like, man, it'd be really cool if we could let other people into these conversations that don't get to wear the red shirt. I was like, let's just start a podcast and let's just talk. And he was like, all right, let's do it. And then we started doing it, and then it started speeding up, and it started going, and it started going, and it started going. And then the goal was always to just be able to reach out to people. And then we always knew we wanted to do something else, and we have something really cool that we're getting ready to launch with regard to just helping and mentoring business owners particularly. Mm-hmm. But I would tell you our goal is largely to basically in a more granular level and more effectively than my personal opinion anybody's doing it right now, is to nurture and help coaches and affiliate owners. That's it. Just help them run good businesses, but help them run good businesses that are based on providing a world-class service. So what I mean by that is you can have a lot of sales, right? If you have a good sales funnel and you can run a good ad, you can throw some decent numbers out there. That doesn't mean that it's a good business. It doesn't mean that you're a good coach.
Yeah.
And conversely, you could say the same thing. Simply because you're fit and you're a great coach doesn't mean that you can have a successful business. Mm-hmm. In order to really build something special that is going to reach people and touch people and absolutely change lives, not only people you work with, but yours, you have to pursue both. And I've always, the number of things you can steal from CrossFit is endless, just as far as from theories, right? So if you think about the 3 pillars for CrossFit, so we've got, when I say pillars, I'm talking about movements. We have monostructural metabolic conditioning, you have gymnastics, and you have weightlifting. What if I think about my business as an athlete? And I've done a podcast on this because this was this weird epiphany that I had one day. If I think about, everybody understands that where you're like, hey, well, if you suck at running, like, you're not making the CrossFit Games. Mm-hmm. If you're a great gymnast, but you can't snatch, you're not going. And everybody knows how that works. Why don't we look at our businesses the same way? Okay, well, I need to understand marketing, right? That could be like gymnastics, because marketing is wildly effective if you can master it. It's just super tedious and takes forever to learn, right? Mm-hmm. I can think of like my business operations and financially how I run my business as monostructural metabolic conditioning, because like if you got no cardiovascular endurance, well, you're not really going to be good at anything. So it's just like how you run your operations. Is it efficient? Is it profitable? Like that's ultimately what allows you to do all the other cool stuff. And then weightlifting is like coaching, in the sense that everybody says they're really good at it, but very few people are really good at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to strike a balance of all 3 of those. And like, I really want to be the best coach I possibly can be. I really want to understand that sales is actually how you drive a business. And it doesn't have to be dirty, sleazy sales, but understand that sales is a thing, and to ignore it would be stupid.
Right.
And then I have to run a profitable business that has systems so that they can replicate themselves, so that I can ascend people or myself through the ranks of the business in order to continue to grow it so that I can expand my reach. Mm-hmm. And understanding that there has to be a balance in pursuit of all of those is no different than understanding I need to have good cardio. I need to have good gymnastic skills. I need to be proficient in weightlifting, because it's the only way I'm going to actually be a well-rounded athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. CrossFit literally applies to everything in life, it seems,
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
I probably bludgeon people with that idea too much, but it really does.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it just, you really can apply all of those different facets that you learn about as a coach, as an athlete, and it just kind of transfers over. And I think it starts with that basis of, like you said, I mean, where you started off as an athlete and being able to grow and form yourself and have these experiences, and then ultimately leading to the world of CrossFit and being able to have those, the ability to transfer that knowledge onto others.
Yeah, it's been, and obviously I'm a little bit more familiar with the content and the theories and all those stuff than most people, because I give those lectures, but
right.
I have spent a lot of time like trying to really think and unpack like how they apply elsewhere. And I've yet to find a situation where they don't apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that really is amazing. I love that. I mean, you've dedicated your life to this sport and to teaching it and these experiences. But then to be able to realize how it applies outside of it too, in just your general life.
Yeah, it's been super helpful. It's helped me a lot. It's helped me frame a lot of things. It's helped me help other people.
Yeah.
It's been fun. It's rewarding.
Absolutely. Well, Fern, looking back in just truly this incredible life you've led with all these navigating transitions and ultimately leading to where you are today, being able to help so many people inside and outside of the fitness industry. I just have one final question that I ask all of my interviewees. What do you want to be remembered for?
Ooh, that's a great question. This is going to be kind of probably a broad and maybe a weird way to answer this, but I think I ultimately would like to, when I die and then like everybody shows up to the after party, I kind of just want people who I've been in contact with to look back and think I'm better for having been around this person. And I don't mean that in the sense of it like I was somehow this catalyst that like made people better, but just somebody who was constantly kind of pushing the envelope and challenging people on their ideas and their thoughts, to make them better in their own way, nothing to do with my life. That's really how I'd like to be remembered, and that's kind of the goal with the podcast. That's kind of the goal with my affiliate and my coaching staff, is to look back and be like, man, I'm really, because I have people like that in my life where I'm just like, I am glad that I crossed paths with that person. That's probably what I would want people to say. Just end it right there. I'm glad I crossed paths with that guy.
Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest, check out the show notes at keepmovingforward.us. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all things coming out of the KMF Collective Studio. Always remember, you can beat the odds and go the distance if only you keep moving forward.